Hi there, friends. My name is Karen Williams, and I'm the author of Treasure, A Soul Journey with the Invisible, the true story of how Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist happened to me in real life. What I discovered through my journey was that there were two heroes in The Alchemist and not one. Santiago wasn't the only hero. So in 2019, I sat down and wrote the story of the other hero in Paulo's The Alchemist. This hero I gave the name Anwar, and this is his fictionalized story of how he met Santiago at the top of the dune. This particular story is available on our Amazon and also Lulu. It's a very small book, and so it's very cheap. But I will also be giving you, the readers, the chance to download a free PDF of Anwar's story from my Facebook page for my book. And the Facebook page is called Treasure, A Soul Journey with the Invisible, Karen Williams. I'll be probably doing that next week, but as a taster, I would like to read the introduction to Anwar's story. So sit back, relax, perhaps even close your eyes, because you might get bored with this image of the front cover of Anwar's story. Close your eyes and enter into the world, the magical world of the invisible. Author's note. Dear friend, Anwar's story is a fable I have written, some of it channeled from an invisible spiritual realm, which tells the fictional story of the other hero in the iconic best-selling book, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. What other hero, I hear you ask? For millions of readers of The Alchemist, the book is simply a fable about a young Andalusian shepherd boy called Santiago, who dreams of finding treasure near the pyramids of Egypt, and who abandons everything in his life in pursuit of that dream. After many challenges and life lessons, he then finally finds his treasure in a truly unexpected and paradoxical way. Well, dear friend, my fable will reveal to you that this is not actually the whole story. In 1995, when I had never heard of Paulo Coelho or his famous allegory, I was living on a hill in the Andalusian countryside in southern Spain. At the beginning of that year, I embarked on a spiritual quest to find my soul as a result of experiencing a very deep dream. My quest began in more or less exactly the same way as it had for Santiago, because the dream came to me one night after returning from visiting an old abandoned ruin high on a hill near my parents' house. That life-changing dream took me to Tarifa and Tangiers, just as Santiago's dream had in The Alchemist. And then, like Santiago, I found myself leaving Tangiers and embarking on a journey through a desert. In the shepherd's case, it was the Sahara Desert. However, in mine, it was a metaphorical desert in England. After 9 months in my personal wilderness, I eventually arrived at my destination, a land of pyramids. Although these pyramids were not the pyramids of Egypt, as they were for Paulo's shepherd boy, they were symbolically equivalent to the Egyptian pyramids in The Alchemist. There I endured a beating in much the same way as Santiago had at the end of his own journey. And then, just like Santiago, I was finally given my true treasure by the man who beat me. When I returned to Andalusia, I was sent a copy of The Alchemist by some Spanish friends, and on reading it for the very first time in my life, was surprised and astonished to discover some of these peculiar coincidences between myself and the so-called fictional hero of Paulo Coelho's tale. However, being still a novice in my own spiritual quest, It was only 4 years later that the universe revealed to me why this was so. As I stood on a hill in April 2000, looking at the ruin which I had visited before having my own powerful dream, I suddenly experienced a cosmic flash of insight and was shown that I was in fact the real-life Santiago of Paulo's fable, and that his book was not completely a work of fiction. The truth is that Paulo had unconsciously channeled his story from an invisible spiritual realm, and in so doing had inadvertently predicted the future. That future then happened to me in real life 7 years after the publication of The Alchemist in 1988. This is an example of life imitating art. In 2014, in an interview with Oprah Winfrey in his home in Geneva, Paulo posed Oprah the following question. "But Oprah, you want to know, did I write The Alchemist? I'm not sure. I'm sure that I was a good instrument." Paulo was alluding to the truth with his question and answer to Oprah, but never went so far as to use the word channeled. Back in the year 2000, when I was given the unexpected insight that I was Santiago in Paulo's book, this spurred me on to continue with my quest for the light of my soul. And like the shepherd boy, I abandoned and risked everything in my life in order to find that inner treasure. In the process, the journey allowed me to make 2 completely accidental discoveries of 2 extraordinary truths. The first of those truths is that The Alchemist is a classic example of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. And the second is that the fable contains a hidden spiritual archetype, the archetype of mankind's journey in search of redemption. When I uncovered that archetype in the fable, it became obvious to me that this same archetype was at the heart of the original story from the Arabian Nights on which Paulo had based The Alchemist. And so both stories had never just been about one hero and his personal adventures. No, there were actually 2 heroes. Santiago was not the only protagonist of The Alchemist. His long journey and final discovery of his treasure had only been made possible because he had encountered the other hero within this archetype. On making my second discovery, a huge horizon of new understanding opened up before me on my quest, and it became clear to me that those 2 heroes in Paulo's fable were actually personifications or symbols of the 2 halves of the human soul. Yes, dear friend, quite unconsciously, each half of the soul, physically incarnated by Santiago and the leader of the refugees, goes in search of its other half. Their journeys into the outside world are the only way in which both of these heroes can meet and in so doing find their respective treasures. When Santiago is beaten by the other half of his soul at the end of his journey, it is because he encounters a physical personification of that part of his soul which is his ego, an ego consumed with an obsessive desire to find treasure for himself and only for himself. And so the alchemical heart of the alchemist is that it is only when the shepherd boy has had an encounter with his own inner darkness that the light of his soul, his treasure, can be revealed to him. But equally, the leader of the refugees also encounters his own darkness by meeting Santiago, and through that encounter also finally finds his personal treasure. Paulo Coelho was completely unaware of the other hero hidden inside his fable, and so never addressed the fate of Santiago's other half. But as you will discover within these pages, my friend, there truly is another story to be told, the story of this other man. After 23 years on a spiritual odyssey, I finally brought out the story of my quest in my book, Treasure, New Edition 3. And in it I placed a short, channeled account of how the leader of the refugees received his own treasure from Santiago at the very end of Paulo's fable. I contacted Paulo Coelho many times as I wrote my book to share with him the fact that there were actually two heroes and not just one in his book. But unfortunately, by the time I had managed to pop out from seemingly nowhere to tell him of all of this, The Alchemist had already become a worldwide bestseller, and so I don't think Paulo was quite able to digest or believe any of what I had to say. Although, as I have just said, I told a small part of the leader of the refugees' story in Treasure, in the months that followed after bringing out my book in 2019, I felt drawn to delving into the possible life of this other hero of Paulo's tale. Who was this invisible man, and what was his story? That delving took the form of many sleepless nights, during which my imagination journeyed into his psyche and what had led him to have his fateful meeting with Santiago. Then, about 10 days ago, dear friend, to my utter surprise, I got up one night, switched on my computer, and began to write this fable you have before you. I allowed it to flow out of me, and flow it did. That is always a sign to any writer that what they are typing onto the page is uniquely important, possibly in some way channeled from another realm, and most definitely needs to be told. In Treasure, I had called the invisible man Anwar, because in Arabic, Anwar means light. And this, of course, is what these two protagonists of Paulo's fable so desperately wanted to find, even if only subconsciously, the light of their souls hidden in their other halves. Santiago's story and Anwar's story, taken together, answer many readers' questions which have been metaphorically left hanging in the air for over 3 decades since Paulo first published The Alchemist. And by answering those questions, I have finally been able to give you and all the readers of Paulo's fable the missing piece which makes this iconic and beloved story whole. I hope you enjoy my creation of Anwar's life and spirit, and my imagining of this untold half of Paulo's fable. Paulo was right when he said to Oprah Winfrey in 2014 that he had been a good instrument when writing his book, but unknown to him, he was not the only one. The universe exhibits an uncanny precision in its workings, and will do everything it can to make the truth known, using whatever and whoever in order to accomplish that goal. However, more often than not, it may decide to take an extremely long time to do so. At least it may seem that way from our very limited human perspective. And so it has taken more than 30 years to reveal the alchemist's other hero's story through its other instrument, namely me. But better late than never, as the saying goes. The result of those workings is here before you, my friend. I sincerely wish you an interesting and illuminating read. England, November 22nd, 2019. So folks, there you have it, the author's note and introduction to Anwar's story, which is the story of the other hero of The Alchemist. For more information about Paulo and myself, please go to Coelho'S The Alchemist, The True Meaning, Part 4. Many thanks for listening, and goodbye.